Good morning and welcome to another episode of Who Dares Wins. I'm your host, JP Ross, and today's topic I'd like to talk about is rest. And what I want to say about rest is that it's something that we truly take for granted, but it's a promise from God. So, as I always say in the last two episodes, so far we've had 2 episodes, thank you for listening. But in the last 2 episodes, I've mentioned that from time to time I'll be talking about my faith, and I'm a Christian, but I believe that I see the world through rational eyes, and I try to be engaged in culture and understanding of why people would not be interested in faith or things like that. But this podcast is about daring you to have faith and daring you to take risks. And sometimes faith is more than just, becoming a Christian or maybe another, major religion that is out there. Faith is essentially, believing for something before you even have evidence to see it, like believing in something before you even saw the outcome. So it's like, for instance, sometimes when we are applying for jobs, we put out resumes and we expect, to be called back or to be called in for an interview. But some of us are so skilled in our specific locations or vocation that we know we're going to be called in, and we already know how the interview process is going to go. I feel like that in a way is like faith. It's like we step out believing for what we are looking for or expecting, and then having full assurance that what we were believing in that we can't even see is actually real, tangible, and will happen. If that's right. If it's not, definitely let me know. Wherever you can send comments or voice messages through this. So today I wanted to talk about rest. But before I talk about rest, I honestly just really want to spend some time and just say thank you. Thank you for everyone who has listened and everyone who has given me encouragement. It just means so much to me. Wow, just even people saying that my voice sounds good for a podcast, you have no idea how much that means to me, because literally growing up I hated my voice, and until recent years I kind of still did. I wanted some bold masculine voice, right? I want to be raw, oh, I don't know, some kind of bassy voice, and think like a singer from Boyz II Men or something back in the 90s, and I just really needed to appreciate that part of my life, right? I need to appreciate who I am, and we need to appreciate who we are. And another thing I didn't really like about myself was I didn't like the way I looked. And at some points in my life I got so, I've been through a lot of things, and I'm sure many of you have been too. We all have our own journeys, but some of the things that I've been through I'll talk about in future episodes as we engage in the larger community and vulnerabilities and things like that, and transparency. But what was really amazing is that I really hated the way I looked. I hated my skin. I hated how skinny I was. I hated the very sight of me. And so I remember one summer I was in Florida, and I was in Florida, and I was so covered up. I was wearing a hoodie or something like that, and then I took off the hoodie because that was kind of ridiculous. It was summertime in Florida. Come on, somebody, it's so hot, right? And in Florida too, it just feels like the sky is It's like over your head. Like, it feels like you could touch the clouds. So that one is like extremely beautiful and amazing. And two, it's like, hey, calm down. Like, give me some space, please. Right? It just kind of feels like it's on you, and like the sun is on you, and, and so what was really funny is that, like, I took off the hoodie, and I had my Pearl Jam 10 members only, like, long sleeve on. Back then, Pearl Jam had a fan club. I don't know if they still do, but, you'd put on a long sleeve, and it was just like, it was just kind of crazy because it was summer and it was so hot, but I'd rather suffer, and I would skate that way and everything, and I would rather suffer than see myself. I hated myself. Maybe you feel like that too. Maybe you've experienced life in that way where things happened in your life and you were like, literally like, I'm a monster. Like, I don't deserve joy or freedom. I don't even know what it was that I really felt I deserved back then. I didn't think I deserved anything. It's kind of a new idea and a new way of thinking that has come upon my life in the last like 15 or so years, and especially in the last about 3 to 5 years. But today's episode is about rest, and I just brought that up about my looks and my voice because when I put out the episode, and many of you have only heard the first episode so far, so you haven't even gotten to second episode, I talk about homeless outreach, and that if you know me personally, you know that that's like a deep passion of mine, and I think that like many of us could be involved in works to help end homelessness and help understand what it means to be a homeless veteran and things like that, and mental health and substance abuse and just compassion in general, right? But it's a really good episode. I really encourage you, and I really go into it, and I talk about my origins of how I got into homeless outreach. But I just really wanted to stress my thanks because starting this podcast was about me taking a risk, was about like I had something on my heart and I had been waiting years to do something about it. Like, I dream to write books. I dream to speak all over the country and help people and encourage people to know how to be the church, to help organizations to be better, to help create a more compassionate world, really. One by one, I have a long game approach to outreach. I believe in one person at a time and spending quality time with that person versus the macro, which is just as important. And I'm just not necessarily called to that, but in the macro level, it's like homelessness as a large, or like incarceration as a larger thing. I really believe in, like, if I meet with one prisoner or I meet with one homeless person or one veteran, then I can maybe help be a part of changing that one person's life, and that one person could end up changing 10 more lives. And you never know. But that's just how I'm skilled, and I think that's what I needed, and so I try to be honest about being real with like who I am and where I come from, and how I understand God. And I just feel like I understand God through direct relationships, and I'm learning how to expand that though, because so like your gift will make space for you, it says in Proverbs 18:16. So it's like, you may be wondering like, man, when I started rapping, I never thought like I'd be so successful. Well, it's because you have a gift, and your gift will make space for you. It'll make room for you. And what I realized is that from the time I was a little kid, my gift was talking. My gift was that I saw things in detail. I saw things in a certain way, in a certain light. And so from the earliest time, I wanted to be a poet. And, and so what I'm getting to is that I thank you for what you said, because stepping out and releasing the episode and just releasing my voice to the world affirmed me, because hearing myself, I was like, wow, that sounds pretty good, actually. I think I would listen to it, and it can only get better. But when I heard your responses, I just was so encouraged, because we have a voice, and you are beautiful, and you are handsome, and you were made by God, and the way you were made is perfect. And there's a bunch of other things going on in the world that would have you not realize that. And so when I released that episode, I realized, wow, the very thing I hated about myself is actually my greatest strength. And so yeah, I just want to encourage you with that even now, as you're listening, like, man, even now as you're listening, like, your weaknesses, your story is where your glory is going to come from. It's just, it's not even a cliche. It's just truth. So thank you for listening for that. Now I'm going to transition into rest. And I'm not going to really talk long. This isn't going to be that long of a message, I don't think. Or episode. But I just really want to talk about rest and just give like a story, and then and then I'll sign off, and we can get going. So anyway, for years and years and years, I worked in food service. I worked a lot of hours. I worked so many hours. When you work in food service, you're on your feet a lot. You're waiting tables, you're making drinks. Hospitality is a very demanding job, But I loved it because I considered myself like an artist. I considered myself as a creative. And I didn't realize it at the time, because back then I just thought that artist meant I paint, or artist meant like I compose music, or like, I draw or something like that. I never looked at art like it could be like, writing, or it could be like a creative form of outreach, or something like that, right? Or like the way we view the world, like an artist views the world in sort of in color and in different tapestries of sorts, right? We just see it different than maybe someone else who's not necessarily inclined that way. And the more I started to sort of sit in that, I would work really hard so that I can go and do outreach. And I went to school for social work. Well, kind of. I went to school for human services, and I was focusing on social work, and then sociology and African American Latino studies, because I became aware of, implicit bias and racism. And I was a punk rocker, so like I was angry at the system. Then I became a Christian, and I was like, no way, like God, I became like super kind of reactionary conservative Christian. And then from that, when I went to college, I was like, whoa, dude, a lot of people have done a lot of really horrible things in the name of Christianity. I need to take some time and like really think about this. Like, this isn't what I think. This is what I believe. What does this mean? And so just wrestling with that and working through it through punk and through Christianity. And so I worked a lot, and then I would do outreach. Outreach was my way of kind of communicating that what you've heard or how you've experienced church or how you've experienced God is not true. God is here. He's with the homeless. God is here. He's with the prisoner. God is here. He's with the battered woman, the orphan, the widow, sex abuse survivors, He's with offenders and the violent, He's not like, a lot of us have been in churches. Like, I remember I went to church and I had like dyed hair or something, like purple hair, and they were just like, you can't come here. Another time I was in a church in Newburgh, New York, where I believe a Latina mother came with her baby needing help. And back then in parts of Newburgh, it was really kind of rough in Newburgh, New York. And our church was right there in the epicenter of all the violence and all the drugs. And we could have been a light post for people. We could have been like bringing people into shore. But instead, the leadership of that church said, there's a Spanish church down the block. And I remember being like 15 years old and being like, this is some, I was really upset. And so anyway, so like I ventured to express the gospel in a way that is about compassion and empathy. And then I got back into social justice after college, and I was like, no, Jesus is justice. And now in my walk with God now, I'm like, wow, Jesus is justice and Jesus is mercy. I just think that we are so quick to be like, I know who I am and I know what I believe. But life isn't like that. Life is a constant journey, and you're going to continue to rethink the things that you had a foundation on, an anchor on last year. What 2019 is going to be for you is going to be, you have no idea. All I know is I'm praying and I'm believing that 2019 is going to be great, right? And so when I speak about rest, right, once my ADHD is taken over again, but when I speak about rest, what I'm saying is that, God cares about you being healthy and being well. And so years ago, I worked a lot in hospitality. What I didn't realize is that I'm anemic and I have poor circulation issues, and my blood doesn't necessarily flow like it's supposed to, like other people. So I was supposed to wear compression stockings or compression socks. I don't like stockings, feels weird, so we'll say socks. Amen. But because I didn't wear them, I developed varicose veins and a lot of pressure on my legs and my ankles and my feet. And a few months ago, last year, it got really bad. And I developed an ulcer in my ankle. And we're talking about, like, when you go to the doctor, you go to the emergency room, they ask you, where are you at a level of pain from like 1 to 10, 10 being the highest. Prior to that, I had been working, doing doubles, doing all kinds of things at like probably a 7 or an 8. And I just kept doing it. And I kept riding my bike to work and everything. Like, I was just like, I'm in so much pain. But I would get through it. But I just really, really felt bad because the pain was jeopardizing my relationships with our customers. The pain was jeopardizing my relationships with people and how I was viewing the world. And I began to, you become resentful and bitter, and you're just like, man, like if I wasn't so broke, or if I wasn't this, or if life wasn't this way, I would have the health care I need and I'd be able to get my ankle fixed and I wouldn't even have to do this, right? But this is what's so great. So I would consider it a blessing that I was blessed to be a part of a church family that was really supportive. And so the year prior to that, from the time I started going to this church, and now I go somewhere else, but they taught me about health and about taking care of myself and about resting. Am I resting? Am I eating? Am I sleeping? And I really wasn't, like I used to eat a certain way and I had a moral reason for it, but in time it proved to be not healthy for me, but it's very healthy for someone else and a lot of other people. But I realized that I was depressed all the time, and I realized that I needed certain things And the way to get those things met was I had to change my diet. Around that time, my grandfather died on my father's side, and then last year my grandfather on my mother's side passed away. And it just puts things in perspective. And I realized when my grandpa Ross died that I have a gift and I have something about me that helps people feel like God's a little bit closer than God was before we talked. But I'm ruining everything. I'm literally depressed. I'm suicidal. I'm so dark. And maybe all I need to do is figure out what I need to eat for my ADHD. Maybe I need to just focus on my mental health. Maybe I need to focus on my spiritual health. And by focusing on that, I might be able to change my circumstances and then reassess what I'm really struggling with, what's really going on. Because I was so sad and I was going through some things. At that time I was going through a divorce. And divorce is very hard. I definitely was not a great husband. I was not, and we had our problems. But the way I found healing is by embracing the fact that I wasn't a good husband and by doing everything I can now to make myself a better man and to encourage people who are getting married or who are married or who are thinking about divorce to think about all these different facets of what it means. And it's so much more than your day. It's so much more than your first year. It's really like, do you love each other? And if you love each other, you'll work at it, right? So I was going through these different things. And my grandfather died. And I was at the funeral and I got to speak part of the eulogy. And my whole family, I hadn't seen them in years on the Ross side of my family. And they said, wow, John's going to be a preacher? I never used to talk to anyone. I was the kid that would be in the corner. I was the kid in the corner, cutting himself and wearing cardigans to cover it up in the 90s. I didn't talk to anyone because I didn't believe my voice had any value, that no one would want to hear my voice. Why would anyone want to talk to me? Because whenever I've tried to talk in the past, unless it's maybe my mom or something, people shut me down. They would, in a way, take my voice from me. And so I began to believe that I don't have a voice anymore. So in that day, I was like, wow, Grandpa impacted so many people. He became a pastor after he came home from the army, and he just was this amazing man. And he lived a long life. And I was like, I am dying for a cause where, in a lot of ways, the group I'm fighting for is already dead in a way. I just kind of felt like I don't know. I feel like I'm sabotaging myself for a cause that other people could fight because they are supposed to fight that fight. And I have my own fights, but I'm not fighting them because I'm unhealthy because I'm fighting this other fight. And so in that moment, I left the funeral and I began to change my diet that day. And from there, I started to experience better health, mental health. I started to think different. I had the proteins I needed that affected my ADHD. I realized that ADHD means that you need to have a high amount of protein and certain kinds of things like that in the morning. For some reason, it helps bring our brains together or whatever, right? It helps us bring our attention spans together. Then throughout the day, little parts of protein and things like that. And it just helps stabilize me. And I was like, whoa. And I started going to my church, and I just started really serving at my church, and I started seeing my calling and my vocation arise. Then I was in my preaching class in seminary, and I felt an audible voice tell me, you are called, but you're telling everyone else's story. But when you begin to tell your story, you will find your calling. You will find your sermon. You will find your preaching voice. Because up until that point, I was like, I'm not a preacher. I can't preach, right? But it started with changing that diet, because I began to start having a more healthy mental attitude. Fast forward, service, things like that, learning how to go to sleep. I fast forward to a few months ago, and the pain got up to a level 10. My boss and my friends took me to ER a couple times, and there was nothing that could be done because I didn't have insurance. I think a lot of small business owners would love to insure their workers, but it's just, I just think, like, I know now and I understand it's a lot different, small business versus larger businesses. And I just think, like, the more you start to venture and start thinking about if you should have a business, we understand differently. We will all, and I understand differently how all these things happen. I used to be so much like, I want this and I want that, and unionize and this and that, right? And those are good things. But they're different circumstances, right? So I reached out to a friend, and that friend said to me, this is a good problem. And I said, how? And he's like, you make too much money for something. And I was like, oh, wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. I make too much money for something. I never looked at it that way. So one day I spent all day long, and I went on the marketplace, and I found a health plan that I could afford. It would be a sacrifice, but I decided I was going to put my health first, because I have a calling and I have a purpose, and I have a purpose that I think is unique to me. And it's why I'm able to do what I'm able to do and build the relationships I'm able to build, and why the people, you who are listening, are so diverse. And I owe it to you and myself to be healthy. And so get this, the first week I went to see a doctor for my ankle. I was scheduled for surgery that Monday. I saw him Friday, scheduled for surgery on Monday. I had 4 surgeries that week. And then I've been in recovery for the last 3 months. And now, since that process, I gained weight. I gained a deeper level of understanding about prayer and about how to be there for my friends, and also purpose. So since that process, this is what's happened. I helped found an organization, a nonprofit called the Men of Honor Foundation. And you can find us on Instagram. Just type in Men of Honor Foundation. Where we speak to the heart of men. And I'm really passionate about that. And I just really feel like a lot of men really need to be reminded that they are sons, that you are a son of God. And that God has great plans for you. I needed men in my life, and I didn't have them. One of the reasons why I had a divorce, I believe now, is that I had no plan for my marriage, and I had no way to carry out that plan. My only plan was don't get divorced. That's a terrible plan. So I started the Men of Honor Foundation with a friend. I mean, I more or less assisted and helped with it, right? So the Men of Honor Foundation, I began volunteering for an organization called Prison in the Wild at Rikers Island with my friend who gave me that advice about making too much money. And those men in that group have changed my life. I continue to eat differently. I continue to rest and sleep and go to bed when I'm tired and wake up when I'm awake and drink water and all these things. I took a back seat from serving so much because I was just exhausted, you know what I mean? And after surgery, or like before surgery, and like if you got ankle issues and stuff, just find something that you really are called to and volunteer in that, and then just like enjoy your life. So Sundays for me are like church, and then watching football, or like basketball, or watching a TED Talk, or just chilling at home reading a book, or spending time with my friends that I volunteer with. And I just really, really, really love it, and I enjoy it. And I mean, my life is so much more fulfilling. So, so this turned into actually a long episode. So basically, I want to wrap it up, and I just want to say that, since that surgery, I've gained much deeper friendships. I've learned how to lead better because I had time to really think about how I lead. I research everything. Anything I have a question about, I take the time to research. I began to do research on what it means to have your own business, and what it means to pioneer, and to step out, and to step forward, and to fall forward, right? I began to internalize this phrase, the best is yet to come, and I believe it with all of my heart. And the best is yet to come, but it's only possible if you take care of yourself. So if you have an issue or a concern in your life, send me a message. We can talk about it. But I really, really want to challenge you. I want to dare you to step out and be healthy, and to do what you need to do to be healthy. If you have an illness and it's undiagnosed, or you've been scared to go to the doctor, I want you to get some friends behind you and talk about how can we start getting help. Not every doctor is going to have your best interest in mind, but find the right one. Maybe you've been eating a certain way and you were like, no, this is the way it's supposed to be. You might have a noble cause behind why you have the diet you have. You might be trying to lose weight. You might be trying to gain weight. I really, really want you to take the time to think, is this really what's best for me? Or is starving myself, or overeating, or things like that, or being in a cause for other people? Or is it for me? Because what I realized is that while I was in pain from not eating right, I would tell myself that it was for the justice of a few. It was for the voice of a few. But the truth is that I felt I deserved to be in pain. And that's powerful. Because you've been forgiven, and you have been set apart, and you are loved by the God of the universe, and by humanity and creation. And you deserve to be well, because there is great, great, greatness in you, but you're missing it because you think you deserve this situation, but you don't. And we can dare each other to step out and to live our best life. And so thank you so much. Thank you for listening. And I hope that encourages you. I just want to leave you with a scripture. It's 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 7. And it says, "Cast all your cares upon me, for I careth for you." And so I might have paraphrased and meshed King James Version with the NIV, our New International Version of the Bible, the New Testament. But I want to leave you with that scripture, because I believe that we don't cast our cares to God enough. He loves you. God loves you, right? Where you are and where you're at. I encourage you to start praying. Wherever you're at, to start praying. Start talking to God. Start journaling. Start writing down. And start thinking of strategies to be healthier so you can live your best life. I'm JP Ross, and this has been an episode of Who Dares Wins on Rest. Take care.